Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio.
Welcome to the messengers in our home. Dear Kardec Radio listeners, welcome back to the messengers in our home. Tonight we're going to talk about chapter 41, Amongst the Trees. And continuing from last week on, I'd like to share one more feedback with you. Dear Kardec Radio friends, my heart wants to send a gentle gratitude for your work, especially related to the Nosolar program. The numerous good insights, the sincere reflections applied to ourselves, the kindness of the words and the loyal study made us live and learn with Andre Louis' experiences and deepen our understanding of the spiritual realm. They also inspired us to work on our inner reform, following the example of the humble and changed apprentice. And as Andre was supported by many good friends and had special influence from his mom, we thank you for being our supporter too. Spiritual growth with friends is such a happy and soft task. I wish you many blessings and hope to be with you again for the Messenger study. Best wishes, Ricardo. Thank you very much for your kind words, Ricardo. We're very happy to be here for everyone every week and learning for ourselves and sharing what we know with all of you. Hello, Mackenzie.
Hi, Francisca. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another chapter of the Messengers in our home.
And now, let's take a moment for our opening prayer. Tuning ourselves to the study ahead tonight, opening our hearts and minds. Dear Mother, Father God, Creator of the universe and of our yet small hearts, we praise you for the beauties of nature and the much good energy we get from there, helping us to recharge our batteries, so that we can continue our journey here on earth to better ourselves, to learn and to grow. And this study is also part of our constant effort of our inner reform. Because the more we know and the more we practice, the more we will come closer to you. We thank you so much, dear God, for your unconditional love for all of us. Because we are your creations. And we ask you to give us the courage and the strength to develop this same kind of unconditional love towards ourselves, our family, our friends, our neighbors, and one day towards all other brothers and sisters in our universal family. We thank the good spirits for their constant love and support during our days. Thank you for reminding us each week with this study of the messengers that you are there, willing to help us whenever we need. Now we would like to start our meeting, and so be it. So let us now listen to the reading of chapter 41. Enjoy.
Chapter 41, Amongst the Trees. A few minutes later, we arrived at a small rural property populated by a welcoming grove of trees. There were orange trees in bloom as far as the eye could see. Banana plants were spread out like fans, while from afar the guava grove looked like a robust patch of greenery. The soft grass invited rest, and a calm breeze was blowing lightly, whispering something through the leaves. Aniceto gulped in long, deep breaths and said, "Although they don't get tired like incarnates, discarnates cannot go without a rest break. Our nighttime operations are usually hectic and laborious. Only about a third of our fellow spirits involved in service on the earth remain active during the day." And noticing our curiosity, he added, "It's only reasonable that it be that way. Daytime belongs more appropriately to the work of incarnate spirits. People have to learn to act, bearing witness to their understanding of the divine laws. For a few hours, at least, they should be left more alone with their own experiences. For humans, one day and night comprises a page in the book of their life. Most of the time they write their daily page alone with the ink of their own sentiments in words, thoughts, intentions, and actions, and then in the overleaf, that is, in nighttime reflection, we help them to correct and adjust their experiences as the Lord allows it." Aniceto fell silent, and we focused our attention exclusively on the beauty surrounding us. That friendly and welcoming countryside was characterized by a highly diverse environment. There were no more heavy emanations from the big city, but a light breeze scented with the most pleasant fragrances. I was reflecting on the goodness of the Lord who had provided us with new resources when Aniceto spoke again. Nature is never the same in any two places. There are no two spots on earth with climates exactly alike. Each hill, each valley has different climatic characteristics. We must realize, though, that under any circumstance involving incarnates, the countryside is a most abundant and vigorous reservoir of vital principles. Generally, all of us spirit workers appreciate the morning air when the atmosphere is also at rest and devoid of dust balls that have been converted into microscopic balloons of bacteria and other lower life forms. However, last night's work did not let us rest any sooner. We leaned back into the velvety grass, and perceiving our thirst for knowledge, Aniceto continued, "What I mean is, the emanations in a forest are very dense because that environment is rather impenetrable to the wind. There, the air usually becomes a suffocating element because of the excess of emissions from the lower kingdoms of nature. Likewise, in a city, the atmosphere is compact and the air is also suffocating because of the mentally dense emanations of the lower groups of humans. That is why in a country we have the ideal place." Joyfully pointing to the swaying foliage, he added, "Here the relatively balanced peace of nature reigns. There is neither the wildness of the virgin forest nor the suffocation of human fluids. The countryside is our bounteous main path, our earthly harmony, our desirable rest." Sheltered delightfully in nature's temple, we rested for a few hours to the coos of a few solitary doves. With the first hues of twilight, Aniceto invited us for a quick walk around the vicinity. I realized that we were feeling much more filled with life. Only after we had walked around for a few minutes did I notice that there were a large number of spirit workers in the neighboring areas. Aniceto perceived my questions and explained, "The countryside is also a vast workshop for our effective work as a group." And pointing to the workers as they came and went, he commented, "The vegetable kingdom has many co-workers. You probably didn't know that many brothers and sisters are preparing themselves to deserve a new incarnation in the world by offering their services to the lower kingdoms. Work with the Lord is a living school wherever we may be." At that moment, our attention was attracted by a commotion on the nearby road. We headed in that direction, following Aniceto, who seemed to have guessed what was going on. I witnessed an amazing scene. A man was lying on the ground in a pool of blood next to a small cart pulled by a mule that was showing signs of great agitation. Two incarnates were hastily providing first aid to the wounded man. "We need to get him back to the farm right now," said one of them, distressed. "I'm afraid his skull is fractured." The number of discarnates helping the small group was very large, however. A spirit friend who looked like the leader of the group welcomed us with respect and kindness and explained what had happened. The cart driver had been kicked by the mule and they had to rescue him. When the situation calmed down, this hierarchical superior called to a road guard and asked him, "Glycerio, how could you let something like this happen? This section of the road is under your direct responsibility." The subordinate replied respectfully, "I did everything I could to save him. He has a wife and kids, but my efforts were futile because of his recklessness. For a long time I have been trying to surround him with care whenever he passed this way. However, the wretch doesn't have the least respect for the natural gifts of God. He is unspeakably cruel to the animals that help him earn his pay. All he knows how to do is to yell at them, get angry at them, and beat them. His mind is closed to suggestions of gratitude. He respects only profanity and the whip. Today, he harassed and punished the poor mule so much that he looked more like an animal himself. When he nearly went out of his mind because of so much fury and ingratitude, my help as a spirit was no longer effective. Tormented by his driver's outbursts of anger, the poor mule kicked him in the head. What else could I have done? I fulfilled my duty." His superior, who had been listening attentively to his allegations, replied without hesitation, "You are right." And since he was looking to Aniceto for approval, our guide affirmed, "Let's help this man as much as we can and fulfill our duty to the good. But let's not miss the lesson here. This imprudent worker has punished himself. Anger is punished by its consequences. Evil follows evil. If animals, our brothers and sisters in the great home of life, provide us with the worth of their service, we, in turn, should give them the worth of education. But people cannot educate if they hate, nor can they build anything useful with fury and brutality." And pointing to the group that was taking the wounded man to a nearby house, he calmly concluded, "As an ordinary man, our poor friend will suffer for many days confined to his bed. Amidst the afflictions of his family members, it will take him quite a while to recover his organic balance. As an eternal spirit, however, he has received a useful and much-needed lesson." Greatly surprised, I observed our guide's serenity, and I began to understand that no one disrespects nature without the painful blow of retribution. Tonight, we're talking about chapter 41, Amongst the Trees, as Francisca said and as we already read the chapter. So, what's happening? Like we said and like we talked about last chapter, Andre, Vicente, and Aniceto went to the countryside. They were heading towards the countryside. And now, after walking and talking, as we discussed last week, they arrived at a small rural property. And we have to understand, basically, at the time when this book was written, it was very close to the capital, right? A place where you could go to the rural part. It is probably not as much as it was in the past today, so it's harder probably to get to a rural property close to Rio de Janeiro, for example. But naturally, and we all know that there are still plenty of options to go to the countryside. And why is it important? It is very interesting for us to notice that these chapters now, they're dealing with nature, right? They're with, we could say bare nature, right? Because naturally, we humans are part of nature, and the air and water that we have every day are part of nature. Maybe our pets are, the pets that we have at our homes are nature. But since we already read the chapter, we know what the chapter is about, we understand what Aniceto and Andre and the message of these two chapters are, which is naturally how the importance of nature for us to recover. And when I say us, I mean Andre here is talking, and Aniceto especially is talking about the discarnate spirits in a big part of the chapter. However, we can clearly understand that although maybe we live in a big city, we have our cars, we drive around, and we live close to big buildings and so on and so forth, we all know how relieving most of the times is when we are away. I wouldn't say for a long time, maybe you don't like that much to be out of the city, but how reinvigorating it is to be close to, let's say, to the beach, right? Looking at the sea, breathing the air coming from the sea, or going to the countryside, exploring the fields, right? Walking in big gardens, in open gardens. And that's what we are talking about here. And what is more important in this chapter is that we see that it doesn't matter if it's in the city or if it's in the countryside, we are always being helped. Naturally, being helped more often at night, as they discuss here, but we can be helped at any time. Naturally, being open to be helped. And we're going to talk a little bit about this close to the end of the chapter as well. So, as we were saying, and now we're going to move along with the chapter, and as a quick reminder, if you have the chance to have the book with you, to follow some of the readings, some of the comments, if you want to take notes, send us your comments, send us your suggestions. Once again, like Francisca thanked Ricardo in the beginning of the reading of our chapter tonight, I would like to thank every single one of you who are thinking of us, who are raising awareness of the program, spreading the word, showing these programs, not only this one, but all the programs at Kardec Radio, at the center that you're going to other people, so that we can study together, learn more, and so that we can practice more love in the world. So let's move along. So Andre, Vicente, and Aniceto, they are walking on the countryside, and they decide to stop. Andre makes a few comments about, seeing some banana plants, banana trees. He sees guava groves. He sees the soft grass. The calm breeze is blowing. And so we don't see a forest here. And this is going to be very, very important for us, for one of the reflections that Aniceto makes us think about. So when they're walking, Aniceto says that although the spirits, the discarnate spirits, don't get as tired as the incarnate ones, they all, and we all, when we discarnate, we will need some rest. And that's what he's talking here about. If you followed us together reading and studying No Solar, you will know that we discussed this a little bit. We already discussed this in this book as well, but depending on how well you can absorb things from the air, vibrations from the air, from water, from some fluids, you can rest and you can work more and more and more as a discarnate spirit. However, even those who can work for long hours, they will have to rest sometime. And that's what Aniceto is telling us here, depending on how how hectic and how tough the work is, lots of spirits need a lot of rest. And he ends up by saying that only about a third of our fellow spirits involved in service on the earth remain active during the day. So let's say if we had 90 spirits, right? More or less 60 spirits would be resting, and only 1/3 would remain active during the day. The other 60 would need some rest, so they would rest during the day and then come back at night to help once again. And that's basically what he says. But he goes on and he explains, because Andre and Vicente were curious about this. And what he explains, which is very, very interesting for us to think about, is what would happen if we had at all times a person saying at all times for us to do this and to do this and to do this and to do this. It would most likely, beyond irritating, although if we are evolved, maybe we would not get irritated, but it would somehow take away our responsibility of doing something, right? Because if a person is telling us to do something at all times, and where is our choice, right? Of course, we can choose to do or not to do what the person or the spirit is inviting us to do. But we should be left alone to our own experiences, to perform what we want to do, to really feel what we need to change on the inside. And then only if we have like a certain type of decision, which could be very, very dangerous for me, for somebody else, we would be helped. And somebody or good spirit, right, our guardian spirit, our spirit friend would come to us and I don't know, show us a hint. Hey, don't do this. Try to avoid this situation, right? If we are attuned to these good advices, by opening up to these good advices, then we would have received the advices. But during the day, usually we are left to our own devices so that we can choose and we can take responsibility for what we are doing and actually changing and assuming all the dues that we need to assume from what we are choosing, be it doing a good thing or be it doing a bad thing, right? A wrong thing. And that's what Aniceto explains to us. And at night, right, we will be visited more by these good spirits who will help us to reflect upon the day, to they will probably try to raise awareness to us, say, think about what you did today, and try to pull from ourselves what we did. And isn't that very interesting if we go back to the Spiritist book, to the Spirit's book, and we read there on question 919, when the question that Kardec asks is what is the best way for us to improve? It said, well, know yourself, like a sage of antiquity said. It said, well, we all know the beauty and how profound this advice is, but how can we practically do this? And then Saint Augustine comes and say, hey, do as I used to do when I was incarnated, at night, reflect upon what you did. What did you do good during the day? Do it again next day. If you did something wrong, try to make amends, try to do it differently so that you go day by day improving yourself. And imagine if we are doing this, we are helping even more those spirits who would come to us and help us to really see how much we need to change to improve ourselves. And then it would be even easier. I wouldn't say it would be easy, but I would say I'm saying it would be easier for us and for them to help us. Naturally, Aniceto finalizes by saying, wait, we do what we can do and what God allows us to do. We cannot do anything that God doesn't allow us to do with the life of other people. And then Aniceto falls silent again, and they start reflecting upon what they're seeing. and Andre starts to see how beautiful the surroundings are. And he says that there are no more of those heavy emanations that he was seeing and he described to us a few chapters ago, those dark clouds full of bacteria and mental vibrations. So he is not seeing all these things. And Aniceto, capturing what he wants, what Andre is thinking, he says, nature is never the same in any two places. And why is he saying that? He, of course, we basically know that there's no need for Aniceto to tell us that, right? And independently, even if we're in a very close place to the one that we've just been to, we will notice that it is different, right? It may be very close, very similar. The climate is basically the same. We have general areas of the same climate type, like the moderate climate. And, depending on where you are in the world, a tropical climate and so on and so forth. But what he's saying is that, of course, that every different place it has its own characteristics, and naturally it's because of the different types of plants, the different types of animals that are there, different types of wind and wind breezes that go through that place. But not only that, right? And because of the spirits of the people who live there as well, right? So it's all together that makes all these things different. But what he also wants to point to us is that even being very different, the countryside and in different places having different countrysides, different types of countrysides. He says that the countryside is a most abundant and vigorous reservoir of vital principles. And that's one of the reasons why we can get so much reinvigorated when we go to a place where we have an abundance of nature. But what it is very, very interesting that he's going to mention is that he's not talking about a forest. He is talking about the countryside where you have open spaces, which is very interesting because of the metaphor and the comparison that he does. So he compares and contrasts the forest with our towns, our cities. And he says that in a forest, the emanations are very dense because the environment in the forest is impenetrable to the wind. So the wind cannot go through, especially in those dense forests when you have big trees, tall trees, and lots of trees. So everybody that goes into a dense forest, they know that the air is very heavy. It's hard to breathe because of the amount of humidity inside, and you find lots of water, usually mud on the floor, and it's you get all sweaty and all that stuff, mainly because there is no air. He's not saying that this is specifically bad, right? But it can be, depending on how it is, it can become suffocating because of the emissions of the lower type of life, right? As he says, the lower kingdoms of nature. And then he makes the comparison with the city, right? In the city where we have a group of people all together in lots of buildings, the atmosphere is compact. We can have wind going through the buildings, right? But the air is also suffocating, not because of the physicality only, the materiality of the thing, but because of the mentally dense emanations of the lower groups of humans. Our question is, and as we always try to do, what is our emanation in the city that we live in? Am I emitting good thoughts to the atmosphere, or am I emitting lower thoughts to the spiritual atmosphere of the city? Am I contributing with the good emanations or with the bad vibrations of my thoughts and of my actions? What am I doing to help my city become a better place to live? Right? And then he finalizes saying that is why in the country we have the ideal place for this reestablishment, for us to not to get too close to these lower vibrations, and not only not in the city, but as well not only not in the forest because of the dense fluidic atmosphere of the city, so that we could not rest as much and could not get a clean atmosphere of the countryside inside the forest or inside the city. And then he finalizes his comments on nature at this specific moment with, and I'm going to read because I think it's beautiful the way he says, when Andre describes to us that Aniceto joyfully pointing to the swaying foliage, says, "Here the relatively balanced peace of nature reigns. There is neither the wildness of the virgin forest nor the suffocation of human fluids. The countryside is our bounteous main path, our earthly harmony, our desirable rest." So it's neither the wildness of the virgin forest with all those like the description that we just made, right? The humidity, all the leaves on the ground, and lots of animals and wild animals, but also not close to the suffocating human fluids that we find, unfortunately, that we still find in our cities. And maybe Aniceto really loves the countryside. Maybe that's why he is speaking so much about the countryside. But we can clearly see how important it is for us to really reconnect with nature, or at least not to lose our connection to nature from time to time, right? Go out and go to a public garden, on the weekend. And if we live on the countryside, blessed be you who can live on a countryside and enjoy, right, all this beauty and all the good fluids that we can take from there. But if we live in the cities, let's just plan some time, right, to go out to the countryside and rest our minds, rest our eyes, breathe a cleaner air, and so on and so forth. And with this, Aniceto and Andre and Vicente, then they just lay down on the grass and then they rest for a few hours, right? Listening to some doves, seeing, watching, and enjoying the moment there, as we should all do from time to time. Then twilight starts to come, and Aniceto then invites them to, just to walk around the vicinity, see what's going on. And what is interesting is that Andre gives a hint for us that Aniceto already knew that probably something was happening. So we can probably see and understand that Aniceto is more connected to the world than Andre and Vicente are at this moment. But before going and seeing what was going on or what would happen a few moments from that specific point in time where they were, Andre notices that before he was not seeing a lot of discarnate spirits that were roaming around the area, but now he starts noticing that there are lots of spirits around. And Aniceto says, the countryside is also a vast workshop for our effective work as a group. And Andre probably didn't understand what he was talking about. So he went further and he says, the vegetable kingdom has many, many co-workers. And how would that be, right? What would they be doing? And once again, I would highly recommend for you guys to go back to No Solar and listen to one of the last chapters where Andre needs help, right? And he calls for Narcisa. Narcisa comes to his help. And when she comes to bring him what he needs to give to a character or a person in the story, she asks for help of a group of spirits who are the protectors or who take care of nature. And they teach her how to make a certain type of medicine. And here what Aniceto is saying is that there are these spirits who are helping and using nature to improve their lives and to improve the lives of others. And he doesn't explain exactly what he is doing, what these spirits are doing, but they are offering their services to maybe to learn more about what the lower kingdoms can do, and to help them to grow. As we all know that everything in nature just goes in chains, right? So from the atom to the archangel, everything works in chains, right? Evolving and progressing over and over again. And we always have things to learn at any time, at all times, independently of where we are and what we are doing. So, but at that specific moment, what happened was something happened on the road, on a nearby road. And they just started heading on that direction. And Aniceto probably, like we were saying before, he already knew what was going on. He was already aware of the situation that was happening there. And so they witnessed an amazing scene, as Andres says, that there was this man who had just probably suffered a concussion of some sort. We already know what it was because we already read the chapter, right? And there was a small cart that was being pulled by a mule, and this animal was very, very agitated. There were two people helping or trying to help that man who was wounded. There was some blood on the ground, and one of the men said, "Well, we need to get him back to the farm right now." And the other one says, and I'm reading this from the book, "I'm afraid his skull is fractured." But what is interesting is that, well, there were these three people, right? One that was suffering, fell probably, and these two were trying to help him. But then what Andre describes is that the number of spirits who were there trying to help this very small group was very large. And that apparently could go against what Aniceto was saying before, right? That during the day, most spirits are resting. But what we have to understand is they are resting if they have nothing to do, if nothing actually happens for them to go and try to help. But if they are around and something happens and they can be there to help, they will be there to help. How will they help? It will depend, and that's what we are going to talk about right now. Because what happens is there's the spirit friend who looks like he was the leader of the group, and when Aniceto and Andre and Vicente arrived, and he looked at them and welcomed them there and explained what was happening. And he says, well, the guy who was on the cart was driving the cart, and that guy was kicked by the mule, and they had to rescue them. They had to rescue the man. But then everything was going okay. Now they were trying to help. They were trying to do their part. Everything was calming down and so on. And then this man, this spirit, looks at another spirit who is around and asks him, Glycerio, how could you let something like this happen? This section of the road is under your direct responsibility. What catches my eye in this question is, okay, a discarnate spirit is talking to another discarnate spirit. One looks at the other, who has no power to do anything, and then he says, how can you let something like this happen? My question to you guys, how can a discarnate spirit ask another discarnate spirit if he let something happen? But he's not talking about letting something happen in the spiritual realm. He is talking about letting something happen in the material realm. So this to me is a question that is very intriguing. It's something that makes me really think about what is the power and how much power, how much responsibility does an incarnate or a discarnate spirit have to stop certain types of actions in the incarnate realm when we are incarnated. Naturally, I'm asking this, and of course you cannot answer me or answer us right now, but it would be very interesting if you could all send us your thoughts on this. But I would give a hint, and I will give a hint about this, and for this we would need to go to the Spirit's book and question 459, when Kardec asks the good spirits, do spirits influence our thoughts and our actions? And the answer that they give to us is, their influence upon them is greater than you suppose, for it is very often they who direct both. So what the spirits are saying is that these spirits, or the discarnate spirits, influence us, right? Influence the incarnate ones is greater than I or we suppose. It is very often those spirits, the discarnate spirits, who direct both our thoughts and our actions. However, and what is very interesting in this answer and in this question is that this is not just because they want, well, of course that they need to want and they want to do something. However, it's not just because they want that they can do. What is the necessary condition for them to really have a big influence on our thoughts and actions? And the answer is, let's wait a few minutes, because the spirit who is talking to Glycerio, right, will give us the answer. And because Glycerio will give us the answer to that question, why he was not able to do something, because his superior looks at him and says, how could you let something like this happen? Meaning that if Glycerio wanted, he could have stopped or at least changed something in the situation so that it would not get as bad as it ended up being in the end. So what Glycerio tells us is that he did everything that he could do to save the poor guy. He, the poor guy, has a wife and has kids. But his actions were futile. Why? Because of his, the man's, recklessness. Glycerio, and maybe that guy, goes back and forth on that same road to do his job, to perform what he needs to do every day or every week. And Glycerio probably works at that same area, so he knows his story, his life story, and he follows him and tries to help. What does Glycerio tells us? He tells us that he's been trying to surround him with care whenever he passed this way. But this guy doesn't have the least respect for the natural gifts of God. He is unspeakably cruel to the animals that help him earn his pay. All he knows how to do is to yell at them, get angry at them, and beat them. his mind is, and this is very important, closed to suggestions of gratitude. How grateful are we to the things that we receive every single day? How grateful are we for the air that we breathe, for the water that we drink, for the house that we share, for the pillow that we have at night to rest, for the food that we have to eat, for our pets, right? How much do we yell at them? How much are we ungrateful to our parents, to our friends, to our siblings, to anybody who gives us and who does something for us? Have we ever thought of how many people were involved in the creation, for example, of my shirt, of the shoe that I'm wearing, of the toothpaste that I have in my bathroom? How many people are working to do the things that I am using right now? The microphone that I'm using to record this, the TV screen that I use to watch my preferred movie, the actors that are right there performing the characters that I love. How much do we have to thank for in this world? Are we open to suggestions of gratitude, or are we closed to suggestions of gratitude? And then the Spirit goes on, and then he says he nearly went out of his mind because of so much fury and ingratitude. That, and here comes the answer to the question that I asked, that his help, that Glycerio's help as a spirit, was no longer effective. He was trying to get close to this man, to get close to his mind, to influence his thoughts so that he could change his action and he would not be kicked by the mule and suffer what he suffered. However, he closed his mind to the influence of the good spirits, and by doing so, probably opened up his mind to the influence of the bad spirits. And then he was not able to control himself because probably some other spirit was trying to get control of him while the other one was trying to influence him to the best, but he closed the door to the good one and then opened the door to the bad side, and then he just fell prey to his own ingratitude and Glycerio could not do anything about it. He even asks, what else could I have done? I fulfilled my duty. What are we doing? What doors are we opening in our minds? Are we opening the doors to the influence of the good spirits or to the influence of the bad spirits? It's our part. So, do spirits influence our thoughts and actions? Yes, more than we can imagine. The question is, to which spirits am I opening the door for that kind of influence? And then his superior comes to him and replied without hesitation, you are right. You were doing everything you could. I just wanted to make sure that everything was being done correctly. And now, what we're going to do, what we can do from now on. Let's help this man as much as we can and fulfill our duty to the good. Let's do the best. But let's look at this situation and let's not miss the lesson here. This man, the imprudent worker, punished himself. Anger is punished by its consequences. And look, when we talk about anger, in this case, for example, what happened was he suffered the consequence through the hands or through the feet of this mule, right? But these days, science more and more shows that all these bad feelings that we have, anger, stress, they all cause sicknesses, maladies in our bodies. So the consequence of anger is to have a suffering body. even if we are not suffering physically from the exterior, bad responses from nature, like the animal right here. But we can clearly see that if I am stressful, it is sometimes as if an animal is punching us back in the stomach, and then our stomach hurts, and then I have an ulcer, I have a stomach problem, I have headaches, and the list of diseases just keep growing and growing and growing. Why? Because we don't know how to control, how to transform anger in love. And he goes on, evil follows evil. Animals are our brothers and sisters, like he says here, in the great home of life. They give us so much. They give us the worth of their service, and what do we give back to them? We should give them the worth of education, of being humble to them, of providing them a hand, of giving them help, of providing them with food, with good care, and so on. However, people cannot educate if they hate. Let's imagine our children. How much are we able to educate our children if we are angry at all times? If we don't stop to think about good things, if we don't stop to be calm, to sit down, to talk, to have a good conversation, how can we educate if we are angry, angry, angry? Nor can they build anything useful with fury and brutality. How many things in the world were created through fury and brutality without destruction and negative destruction? Basically nothing. If we treat somebody with fury and brutality, what is the result of it? Usually more anger, more fear, more hatred, and basically zero love. So, to finalize, he points to the group that was taking that wounded man, to a nearby house, and he says, as an ordinary man, our poor friend will suffer for many days. Naturally, it's physical, right? He had his head hurt, probably a fractured skull, and he will suffer. And not only himself, his family will suffer, his wife, his kids, everybody. And who knows if he will, quote unquote here, survive physically, right? If he will not die because of this. It will take him quite a while to recover his organic balance. And this is the suffering of matter. But see, it is very interesting because he poses, or he puts the suffering in matter. But as a spirit, instead of focusing on suffering, he focuses on learning. And he says, as an eternal spirit, however, he has received a useful and much needed lesson. The question is, and not for him, but once again for ourselves, how much do we learn when we are suffering materially? How much do we really, really change or make an effort to learn the lesson from the suffering that most of the times, and I should add, we cause ourselves? Because we blame other people for our sufferings, but most of the times we completely forget that we are the ones who create our own suffering. We attract the suffering that, unfortunately, I created the situation to, so that situation, I created the situation for the problem to arrive. It is as if I'm digging, right, on the ground, the perfect size for the problem that's about to come. And then when the problem comes, it will fall exactly on that hole that I dug on the ground, and it will fit perfectly, so that I will learn how to solve that specific problem. And that problem will not come to another person who I would think and I would assume, or if I work at the same place, if I have the same coworkers, if I have the same family members, why do I suffer of this and my sister, my brother, my mother doesn't suffer of this but suffers from something different? Mainly because the hole that I dug is different than the hole that my family members dug for themselves. And that's why each problem, although sometimes similar, they are different, because we attract, unfortunately, the lessons that we need to solve the problems that we created in the past. And Andre finalizes the chapter saying that, greatly surprised, he observed Aniceto's serenity, and then he began to understand that no one disrespects nature without the painful blow of retribution. It's the situation of, in the law of action and reaction. If I kick, let's say, a wall, right, there's an action and there's a reaction from the wall on my foot, right? If it's a wall made out of pillows, it will not hurt because it's soft. But if it's a wall made out of bricks, maybe I will break my foot. And it's not going to be the wall's fault. It will be my fault, who created the situation, who kicked the wall. So the reaction is natural to what my action is. And if I create the situation, it will come back to me. If I scream, if I kick the mule, if I'm not grateful to the mule, if I get angry with the mule, one day the mule will say, hey, that is enough. Unfortunately, that's most of the times, that's how we act. That's what we do with our lives. Instead of calming down, looking at our mistakes and changing with time for the better, sometimes we do things the opposite way. We change for the worse. And this ties in with the reflection that we had earlier, which was, what kind of door, what kind of window am I opening in my mind, in my spiritual life? To what kind of spirits am I opening the window to? Am I opening the window to be influenced by the good spirits, by my spirit guide, but by my familiar spirit? Or am I opening the window to the spirits who want to cause suffering, or to not even to cause suffering, but to join me in what they need, in what they want to do? And most of the times, some of these spirits will, instead of help me go forward in life, will drag me down into vices, into something bad, into hatred, into revengeful thoughts. So hopefully, and I'm pretty sure that's not the window that we are opening, that we are opening the other window, right? That we are feeding the good thoughts in our minds and not the bad thoughts that others want to put in our minds. Let's take responsibility of our own lives. Let's not disrespect nature. Let's respect ourselves. Let's respect others. Let's respect nature. And maybe by doing this, who knows, one day from respect we will grow and grow and grow, and one day be able to say with our full mouth, with our full hearts, with our full spirit, that I do not only love nature, that I do not only respect nature, that I do not only respect the animals, that I do not only respect the others, but I love nature, I love the animals, I love the others. I love everybody. And one day we will be able, for sure, to say, and I love God above everything else. And I wish you all a great week, hoping to see you here next Wednesday, once again, for chapter 42 of The Messengers in Our Home. See you next week, everyone.
Thank you for listening to Kardec Radio, broadcasting live every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Email us and share your comments at www.kardecradio.com. Until next time, we wish you many blessings.